Why did she come alone to see him graduate? No uniform, no announcement, just a mother in worn jeans and a black leather jacket slipping quietly into the third row of a high school gymnasium. But the parents around her, they didn't know who she was. And when their whispers turned to laughter, when their hands turned to shoves, they had no idea what they were about to uncover. Because sometimes the most dangerous people in a room are the ones who look like they don't belong there at all. The gym at Ridgewood High smelled like floor polish and nervous anticipation. Blue and gold banners hung from rafters on thin wires, swaying each time the air conditioning kicked on. Folding chairs stood in imperfect rows across the polished basketball court, some wobbling on uneven legs. White tape marked the ROTC seating zone near the front. A borrowed podium leaned slightly left. The school's brass band sat rehearsing the same four measures over and over, their notes blending with the static from a frayed microphone cord no one had bothered to replace. It was just past 6 in the evening. Families trickled in through double doors that squeaked on old hinges, grandparents in floral shirts, baby siblings squirming in dress clothes they'd outgrow in a month, parents juggling phones and oversized flower bouquets wrapped in crinkly cellophane. Some clustered near the snack table where lukewarm coffee and sugar cookies sat sweating under plastic wrap. Others waved from the bleachers, claiming seats with sweaters and purses like they were staking territory. 17-year-old Noah Rio stood alone near the ROTC row, scanning the entrance with the focused intensity of someone who trained himself not to show emotion. He looked like a cadet who'd already passed inspection. Sharply pressed dress blues, nameplate gleaming under the gym lights, hair regulation tight. But his fingers betrayed him, fidgeting with the program in his hands, folding and unfolding the corner so many times the edge had begun to fray. "She coming," someone whispered behind him. Another voice answered, loud enough to carry. Didn't he say his mom was some kind of soldier, or is that another one of those stories kids tell? Noah heard them. His jaw shifted slightly, muscles tightening beneath skin that had learned to hide hurt. But he didn't turn around. He just kept watching the entrance, waiting for the only person who mattered. Then the side door creaked open. She walked in like weather, unavoidable and unannounced. Mara Rios wasn't dressed for attention. Worn jeans, clean but faded at the knees. Black leather jacket zipped halfway over a plain gray shirt. Her dark hair was tied back tight in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry. She carried a small box wrapped in brown paper and twine, held carefully in one hand like it contained something fragile or sacred. No medals, no insignia, no uniform. She walked with a quiet ease that comes from years of moving through hostile territory without drawing fire. Her eyes scanned the room only once, taking in exits, crowds, potential threats. Then she slipped into a seat near the aisle in the third row. Two empty chairs separated her from the nearest group of parents. That group didn't hide their glances. One woman with oversized gold earrings leaned toward her husband, a PTA board member with the kind of smile that came from committee meetings and fundraising drives. She muttered just loud enough for Mara to hear. "That's the SEAL mom." "Yeah, right," their teenage son snorted, making the others smirk. Across the gym, Noah spotted her. His shoulders dropped just enough for someone watching closely to notice the relief washing through him. But he didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just held the program tighter and breathed like someone had finally released a pressure valve in his chest. The ROTC instructor clapped twice near the podium. "Cadets, form up backstage. We begin in 5. Chairs scraped. Conversations quieted to murmurs. The band struck a clean opening note and began the march that every graduation ceremony borrows from tradition. Mara didn't stand to applaud. She didn't lean forward like the other parents craning their necks for better views. She just sat still, calm, watching with eyes that had seen things these people couldn't imagine. And as her son disappeared behind the curtain, the tension in the gym began its quiet crawl towards something no one was ready for. The anthem played through dusty speakers mounted high on cinderblock walls. Everyone stood, hands over hearts, murmuring along to words they'd learned in elementary school but rarely thought about. Everyone except Mara. She rose like the others, yes, but her arms stayed at her sides. Her shoulders remained square. Her chin level, not disrespectful, not performative, just still, like someone who'd done this too many times in too many places to pretend anymore. It didn't take long for the parents in the second row to notice. "She doesn't even stand right," Janice muttered loud enough to carry 3 rows back. Her perfume was sharp, citrus mixed with judgment. "Military, please." Her husband, Harlan Briggs, an Army recruiter turned local radio caller who never missed a chance to remind people he'd served, leaned back in his chair with arms folded. "She's dressed like she works at a tire shop." "That poor kid," added another woman, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, "making up stories about his mom just to fit in." They laughed softly, conspiratorially, the kind of laughter that bonds people through shared cruelty. Mara heard every word. She didn't turn around, didn't even blink. Her breathing remained steady, measured, the way it had been trained to stay under stress. Janice leaned sideways across the empty chair between them and offered a saccharine smile. "So," she said, voice dripping with false friendliness, "which branch did you say you were in?" Mara turned her head slightly, met her eyes with a gaze that held no warmth and no anger, just clarity. "I didn't." The answer was plain, not cold, not defensive, just a fact. Janice's smile tightened at the edges. She didn't like being denied the reaction she was fishing for. "You know," she added, leaning in closer, "my sister-in-law's Air Force. They never show up late to these things." Harlan chuckled, leaning forward now, his voice full of pretend kindness that fooled no one. "No shame in not serving, ma'am. Just don't let the boy build castles on fairy tales. He's a good cadet. Bright kid. Don't want him embarrassed." Mara didn't respond. She looked back toward the stage where cadets were beginning to file in behind the curtain. One of them peeked out for half a second, just long enough to spot her in the crowd. "Noah." He didn't wave, but his spine straightened like someone had flicked a switch back on. Meanwhile, the row of parents behind Mara whispered louder now, emboldened by her silence. "She really thinks she can blend in like that. Bet she just got that kid into ROTC so she could feel military adjacent. You don't get tattoos from bumper stickers." Their kids picked up the tone like it was contagious. One of the teens, Harlan's son, pulled out his phone and zoomed in on Mara's back from a few rows away, laughing when he didn't see anything obvious. "Seals have patches, right? Why hide it unless it's fake?" Another student nudged Noah in the hallway backstage. "Your mom's here. Thought she'd be taller." Noah didn't answer, his jaw clenched. He'd heard versions of this his whole life. At school, in locker rooms, online. That the idea of a Navy SEAL mom was just a story. That he was overcompensating for someone who wasn't around. That women didn't qualify for that. That if they did, they wouldn't be someone like her, quiet and unremarkable. He tried once years ago to show a picture from a base gate. The one where she stood beside a flag with her unit barely visible in the frame. The comments had been brutal. Fake. Photoshopped. Stolen valor. He never showed it again. Now he just breathed slowly and kept his eyes forward. Because she was here. And the people whispering in that gym, mocking her silence, dismissing her presence, they were about to find out what a terrible mistake it was to confuse quiet with absence. They called Noah's name right after the band stopped playing. Cadet Noah Rios, Leadership Citation, Advanced ROTC Program. The applause was polite, just enough to be heard over the squeaking chairs and shuffling feet. Noah stepped out from behind the curtain with his posture locked and his eyes forward. His stride wasn't fast, but it wasn't hesitant either. His cheeks were taut, not smiling, but composed in the way young men learn when they're trying to hold everything together. He reached the podium, accepted the certificate from the ROTC instructor with a quick, crisp salute, then turned toward the audience. That's when he saw her again. Mara stood now, not clapping, not cheering, just standing with her hands loosely at her sides, watching him with eyes that had seen him at his worst and his best and loved him through all of it. Their eyes met for one beat. She nodded once. That was all he needed. He stepped off the stage straighter than he'd walked on. Back in row 3, Janice leaned sideways again, smirking toward Briggs with the confidence of someone who'd never been truly challenged. ROTC needs real parents to motivate them, she said under her breath, loud enough for others to catch. Briggs chuckled, arms folded across his chest like he was judging a competition. Kid's probably embarrassed. No wonder he doesn't talk much, someone else added. Mara didn't react. She returned to her seat without a sound, settling back into the stillness that had always been her armor. But something was building now, something none of them could see yet. A few more names were called, more applause, more photos. Then the instructor announced a brief intermission before the final awards. Parents stood, stretched, headed toward the bathrooms and snack table. The gym filled with movement and noise again. That's when it happened. Briggs's son and 2 others approached Noah near the hallway entrance. They weren't smiling. "Hey, Rios," the tallest one said, blocking his path. "Your mom, she really a seal, or you just playing pretend?" Noah's hands clenched at his sides. "She is." "Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything to you." One of them laughed. "That's what I thought. Stolen valor's a crime, you know. Maybe someone should report her." Noah's voice was tight. "Back off." But they didn't. They moved closer, crowding him against the wall, and that's when Mara appeared. She didn't shout, didn't announce herself. She just stepped between them and her son with the kind of presence that makes people move without understanding why. "Is there a problem?" she asked quietly. The boys hesitated. One of them tried to recover. "We were just asking if." "I heard what you were asking," Mara said, "and now you're done." Briggs's son, emboldened by the crowd forming around them, smirked. "My dad says people lie about service all the time. How do we know you're not one of them?" Before Mara could answer, Janice appeared from the snack table, coffee in hand, looking annoyed. "What's going on here?" "Just trying to figure out if this woman's been lying to her kid," one of the boys said. The crowd thickened. Other parents drifted closer, sensing drama. Janice looked at Mara with something like pity mixed with superiority. "Look, if you're not what you claim to be, that's between you and your son. But don't make a scene at a school event." Mara's voice remained calm. "I'm not making a scene." "Then maybe you should leave before this gets uncomfortable." Harlan Briggs pushed through the crowd now, placing himself beside his wife like he was restoring order. "Ma'am, we don't want trouble, but if you can't back up what your son's been saying, maybe it's time to go." Noah stepped forward, voice shaking with anger and something deeper. "She doesn't have to prove anything to you people." But the crowd wasn't convinced. They wanted proof. They wanted validation for their doubts. That's when one of the boys reached out. Not violently, just dismissively, a shove to move her aside. And Mara instinctively shifted her weight. But the boy pushed harder than he meant to. Caught off balance, she stumbled backward. Her knee hit the polished floor hard. The gym went quiet. Noah lunged forward, but she was already rising, pushing herself up with one hand braced against the cool tile. And as she stood, her jacket shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. There across her ribs, visible through the open zipper and the thin fabric of her shirt, was ink. Dark, faded, unmistakable. A Navy SEAL trident. Earned, scarred over in places. Impossible to fake. The room froze. Because in that instant, everyone realized exactly who they'd put their hands on, and just how far out of their depth they were. What happens when a room full of people realizes they've just assaulted someone who spent years doing things they'll never understand? That they mocked a woman who earned respect in ways most of them never will? The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, crushing, the kind that makes people wish they could disappear. The tattoo wasn't large. It didn't need to be. The trident sat just below her ribcage, partially visible through the gap in her jacket. The eagle, anchor, and pistol were faded in places, the ink darkened by scar tissue that told its own story. But every person in that gym who knew anything about the military recognized it instantly. That's not something you get at a parlor on the boardwalk. That's earned. Harlan Briggs, the man who'd spent the entire evening questioning her credibility, went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. Janice took a step back, her coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand. The boys who'd surrounded Noah moments earlier looked at the floor like they could will themselves through it. An older man in a navy ball cap stood up from the bleachers, lean frame, folded arms, eyes sharp with recognition. "That one isn't fake," he said flatly. Another parent nodded, voice quiet but certain. "I've only seen that ink on coffin covers and command plaques. That's DVGRU." A woman near the middle clutched her purse tighter and whispered to her husband, "What the hell did they do to her kid?" No one answered, because the energy in the room had shifted completely, not just from mockery to fear, but from arrogance to embarrassment, to shame. Mara didn't move. She scanned the room once with those same calm eyes, then turned toward Briggs, Janice, and the others who had circled her earlier. Her voice was level, measured. "This ceremony is for the students," she said. "Don't ruin it with your ignorance." Briggs looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. His face had gone from confident to crushed in the span of seconds. Janice forced a smile that cracked under the weight of it. "Look, we didn't mean anything by." Mara turned slightly toward her. "You meant exactly what you said." The silence deepened. Then Mara looked down at Noah, who was standing straighter now even as his hand trembled near his side. His jaw was clenched, not in anger, but in disbelief, because everything he'd carried quietly for years, all the doubt and mockery and disbelief, had just unfolded in front of the people who least deserved to see it. Mara met his eyes. "They owe you an apology." Noah blinked. "You don't have to." She cut him off with the slightest shake of her head, then turned to face the group. "You mocked my son," she said quietly. "You challenged his truth, you cornered him, you put hands on me." Briggs's son looked at his shoes like they were the most interesting thing in the world. Briggs cleared his throat. I didn't know." "You shouldn't need to," Mara said. The boy spoke first, voice thin and shaky. "I'm sorry." Janice's daughter followed, barely audible. "Me too." Janice hesitated, then muttered through gritted teeth, "We're sorry, Noah, all of us." Briggs looked at Mara like he wanted forgiveness but knew he hadn't earned it, like he was staring at someone from a world he'd only pretended to understand. Before anyone could speak again, the ROTC instructor stepped forward from the stage, visibly confused by the frozen silence that had overtaken his ceremony. He glanced from Noah to the crowd, then to Mara. "Are we ready to continue?" he asked carefully. Mara gave him a single nod. And just like that, order returned. But nothing about that room would ever be the same. How do you move forward when the truth has been revealed in the worst possible way? When apologies hang in the air but can't erase what was said or done? Sometimes dignity doesn't demand words. It simply asks for space to exist. The instructor gave a confused nod from the podium, still unsure what had just unfolded in his gymnasium. But he adjusted his notes and continued anyway, calling the cadets back to formation. Noah returned to his place in line, jaw set, posture straighter than before. His classmates didn't say much. One of them gave him a subtle nod of respect. Another shifted away from Briggs's son without saying a word. Whatever noise had filled the gym earlier was gone now. There was a new quiet in the air, not of anticipation, but of respect, Uneasy, unspoken respect for the woman who hadn't raised her voice once. Mara stayed where she was, standing near the aisle with her arms behind her back. Not crossed, not clenched, just lightly held like a soldier at ease. The instructor cleared his throat. This next citation is for initiative and leadership, both inside the ROTC program and within the broader student body. He looked up. Noah Rios. This time the applause started slow, then grew, genuine this time, not polite, not performative. Noah walked forward in clean, sharp steps. He didn't rush. He didn't shrink. When he reached the center of the gym and accepted the award, he didn't look at the crowd. He looked at his mother. She didn't smile. She didn't clap. She gave him a single firm nod, the kind that said, "We see each other." The kind of signal she'd once given to squad mates before they stepped into something dangerous. And Noah smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough to show that he understood. When he turned to face the audience, they stood. Briggs stood. Janice clapped, though her hands moved mechanically. Even the students who'd mocked him earlier were on their feet now, applauding louder than they had for anyone before. Noah returned to his seat, fingers wrapped around the edge of his award, pulse racing. Not from fear, but from release. Because for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he had to explain who he was. They knew. They all knew. The final cadets received their commendations. The gym lights flickered once as the band began the closing march. Folding chairs creaked. Parents snapped blurry photos on phones they'd juggle with flower bouquets on the way out. But the loudest thing in the gym wasn't music or announcements. It was the silence around Mara Rios. A silence that didn't ask questions anymore. It only watched, waiting for her next move. The ceremony ended with the gym lights dimmed and the band playing the final verse of God Bless America. Families poured into the open space near the stage, hugging cadets, snapping photos against the school's ROTC banner. Laughter returned, but softer now, measured. Noah didn't pose with anyone. He stood near his mother, one hand still gripping the certificate, the other resting by his side. The instructor passed him and clapped his shoulder. "Good work out there, Rios." Noah nodded. "Thank you, sir." Mara stood beside him, still quiet, still unreadable. Her presence alone kept a wide perimeter around them. People wanted to say something, and didn't. Until Briggs approached. Alone this time, no coffee, no crowd, no swagger. He stopped just short of her personal space and looked directly at Mara with the kind of humility that comes from being broken open. "Ma'am," he began, voice lower than before, "I'm truly sorry. I crossed a line. I made assumptions." Mara didn't nod. She didn't soften. She simply replied, "Be better to the next kid, too." That landed harder than any insult could have. Briggs looked down and gave a stiff nod before turning away. Janice lingered near the snack table, not meeting anyone's eye. But her daughter, the same one who had whispered about Mara before the ceremony, approached Noah quietly. "I'm sorry," she mumbled. "You didn't deserve that." Noah looked at her, then said simply, "Okay," and turned back to his mom. Outside, the parking lot glowed under orange sodium lights. The flagpole swayed gently in the warm evening air. Crickets had started up beyond the lot's edge, filling the silence with a kind of peace no one had earned. Mara walked with Noah to the car. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. He opened the passenger door and sat inside. She placed the small wrapped box on his lap. He peeled away the paper slowly, revealing a small wooden compass. Not fancy, just well-made. Inside the lid, his initials were carved with neat hand tool precision. On the back, a message, "Stay pointed toward what's true." Noah swallowed hard. He didn't say anything, just reached across the console and hugged her. Not a side hug, not brief. A full hug, long, unhurried. She placed a hand on the back of his head, and held him for a few seconds longer than he expected. Then she let go. They climbed into the car. Mara adjusted the mirrors, started the ignition. At the end of the lot, Noah looked back once toward the gym. Briggs stood under one of the lights, hands in his pockets, watching them leave. He didn't wave, but this time he didn't smirk either. He simply lowered his head once, a quiet, defeated nod. Mara didn't acknowledge it. She made the turn out of the lot and drove on, headlights cutting through the dark. Her son beside her, his truth intact. And no one in that gym would ever doubt it again. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Sometimes respect isn't demanded, it's revealed. And sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the loudest truth, because strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to show up.